In this video, I want to deal with strategic management. According to the CIPD, strategic management is the undertaking of all those activities affecting the behaviour of individuals in their efforts to formulate and implement the strategic needs of the business. Now, as we'll see as we go through the slides in this talk, continuously it will be emphasized that it's the strategic direction of the business that will drive the HRM efforts. And the HRM efforts will be to recruit appropriate personnel, to ensure adequate training, and to ensure that there is an environment in place within the organization that enables the strategic objectives of the organization to be achieved. The pattern of planned human resource deployments and activities intended to enable the organization to achieve its goals. So it's a whole framework trying to set out a direction in which HRM should travel in terms of its recruitment policy, in terms of its procedures, its training and so on, which will enable the organization to successfully achieve its corporate objectives. By the way, the CIPD is the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, the professional body which looks after the development of personnel development and all related issues for the professionals in that area. So CIPD is the institute, the professional institute for personnel managers. Strategic human resource management is an approach to the management of employees and organizational goals. So that's the widest possible statement. It looks at the organizational goals, the direction in which the business wants to travel, and the organizational goals may be very wide. It may relate to competitive advantage, or product development, or issues about quality. It's then the function of the HRM department to ensure that the resources are in place. In other words, the people are in place with appropriate skills to enable the organization to achieve what it sets out to achieve the strategies that the organization has set itself. So it's now clear that there is a linkage between HRM and the policies pursued by HRM and the policies of the business. They are moving in the same direction. And I think that's what we mean by strategic HRM. We mean HRM that has a purpose, it has a direction, and the direction is determined by the direction of the business. Human resources must be strategically managed in order to support the organization's long-term goals and outcomes. So the organization, as I said, will set itself goals such as competitive advantage, dealing with rivals, dealing with cheap imports perhaps, or dealing with environmental issues, and it'll have a whole range of policies related to the quality of the product and delivery and so on. So it has a whole range, but they're all aimed at perhaps achieving competitive advantage. Under competitive advantage, we can imagine lots of other minor policies, all contributing towards the achievement of, let's say, competitive advantage. So we have a quality policy, a logistics one, a delivery one, a marketing one, and so on. But we also have a HRM one to ensure that the right people are in place to enable the organization to achieve its strategic objectives. So it'll have the right people there who will be recruited, who will be trained, who will be motivated, and who will be, in a sense, looked after, will be developed by the HRM department. Strategic HRM focuses on long-term employee concerns, such as planning for future employee needs, the macro and micro environments, organisation structure, quality, culture, values and commitments. You can see from the list here, these are long-run issues. These are not ones aimed over the short term. The structure of the organisation is a long-term concern. Companies don't change the structure on a regular basis. Companies set out their agenda in terms of structure, the quality of the product, the culture of the organisation, how it presents itself, how it deals with its employees, how it deals with its customers, what is the image of the business within the community and within the market. So these are long term. These have to be built over a long period of time. And it's the same with the HRM function. The employees are recruited for long term, generally speaking. The core employees, the essential employees, the ones who have the particular skills that are needed to produce the service or the product, these are engaged long term. And the training programs that the HRM put in place and the guidance and directions that are issued by the HRM department, the whole process of, let's say, appraisal, all of it fits into a long-term development of employees within the organisation. And those employees are felt to be the best ones to do that particular task. They are recruited specifically with certain skills and competencies in mind, which enable them to function appropriately within the organisation and to help the organisation to achieve its strategic objectives. In order to devise HRM strategies, organisations must use a range of tools and resources to assess their internal and external environments. So the organisations they must be aware of both the internal and external environments. They must understand changes in both. They must understand changes in the market, for example. They must understand trends in the market. They must understand changes in society and changes to required working practices because of pressures in society. They must understand the legal basis upon which employment is based, as well as understanding the internal changes within the organisation, product design, restructuring of the organisation, location, plant location, technology. So it must understand both the external and internal environments of the organisation. So effective HRM must be aware of both. To do this, it may conduct a SWOT analysis. Now I'm going to list out several tools from the management literature here. I'm not going to discuss these because they are the subject matter of separate videos. But they could do a SWOT or a PEST analysis, or a PESTEL analysis as I've got it there. Look at Porter's 5 Forces, or the Boston Consulting Group. Could look at that particular model. They could look at core competencies. What are the core competencies of the employees, and how can they be developed? Now, as I said, I'm not going to talk about these. They are the subject matter of separate videos that appear elsewhere in the course, and ones which I'm sure you will have met before now. There are two approaches to strategic HRM. The strategy approach provides the direction and goals for an organisation. It determines an organisation's behaviour and how they intend to cope with their internal and external environment. Clearly, organisations need direction. They need to know what they're aiming at. If they don't know what they're aiming at, they're drifting. They're drifting from one time period to the next. And that's not good management. That does not lead to good decision making. It's important that organizations have a strategy. It could be to get a bigger share of the market. It could be to develop new products or enter new markets or become the market leader or whatever. There should be some strategy. The organization should be attempting to achieve something which gives it direction. And once it's got direction, that determines the type of technology it requires, the type of machinery, the type of layout, the type of production process, or if it's services, the type of services and the supporting facilities required. So it determines the whole nature of the business once the objective has been determined. But it also, critically, as I said before, determines the type of employee that will be engaged. It will look at the labour market and select employees with appropriate skills, competencies and attitudes that are willing, that will enable the employee to develop. They're willing to adopt training and new working methods. So the strategy drives the HRM. It drives the HRM in terms of the number of vacancies that the organization has, the number of employees that it requires, the types of employees, the skills, competencies, their attitude towards training, their flexibility. So HRM will receive a set of, if you like, characteristics that employees ideally should possess. And it's the function of HRM to try and recruit these people and then develop them within the context of the strategic goals of the business. They should have training programs and induction programs and an environment in which the employees can then work, and they're working towards the achievement of the overall business strategy. There should be strategic planning. Strategic planning, it deals with future operational plans and makes sure that there is sufficient human resources. It's the right people with the right skills at the right time. So the HRM department need to have a strategic plan. They need to know where the organization is going, the strategic direction of the business. They need to know what the business is aiming to achieve, so what the outcomes are from the application of the strategy. And they need to plan their policies and their activities to fit in with that. The functions of the HRM department should augment, it should fit in with the overall direction of the business. It should enable the business to, in a sense, fulfill its aspirations, to meet its strategic objectives by ensuring, as I said, correct people in the correct jobs at the correct time. So the HRM department should have a strategic plan when to recruit, the type of recruitment activities that should be undertaken, the type of diagnostic testing perhaps, psychometric testing or in-depth interviews, presentations. So it should go through a range of selection procedures to ensure that the right people are recruited. It should have timing built into the recruitment process to fit in with the needs of the organization so that the appropriate personnel are in place at the right time. The link between HRM strategy and business strategy, well, employees are considered as valuable assets for an organization. In order to create value, managers must be able to utilize and assess employee knowledge, skills and capabilities. So the employees are a valuable asset. Now, what that means is that the employees are really the core of the organization. It's the employees who actively work to achieve the required outcomes of the organization. It's the employees who will perform the functions, who will enable the business to achieve its objectives. So it's the employees who will do the work. And in order to create value, managers should be able to assess the employees' knowledge, skills and capabilities. It's important that, in a sense, the asset, the human asset, is appropriate for the task. It's properly equipped. Some people may have weak points in terms of certain skills, perhaps technical skills, or it could be communication skills, or it could be people skills, working in teams, or they may have certain requirements, and it's important that the HRM department pick up what these deficiencies are and put policies and activities in place to develop those skills over a period of time. So the HRM may have a policy of training and targeting the training towards the requirements of the workforce, so the workforce becomes more adept at performing the tasks which will enable it to achieve the corporate objectives. So the two go hand in hand. The idea of performance appraisal, for example, is to feed back any shortcomings, in particular, that the employees may have with regards to some aspect of the job. It may be using particular pieces of software, or it may be in using communications channels. It may be in the rigors of the job, or they may find parts of the work process extremely boring. They are human beings after all. So it's important that they're able to feed this back, and that HRM take on board these comments and tries to constructively help by developing policies and procedures that can be put into place which will help the employees successfully contribute towards the achievement of the corporate objective. Strategic HRM is devised from an organization's business strategy. They are both strongly associated with the overall performance of the organization. Well, clearly the business strategy is related to the performance of the organization. In a sense, that's how we would measure performance. It's the extent to which the organization has achieved its strategic objective. If it has achieved the strategic objective, it has performed very well. It has achieved it. But as I said earlier, there is a linkage between the HRM and the strategy of the business. The HRM functions, the policy of HRM, and the procedures that HRM undertake all go towards contributing towards the successful completion of the strategy, or that particular strategy cycle. So the organization may set itself a particular set of targets for the following year, let's say, or for the following 5 years, if its strategy is, generally speaking, long run. So it sets itself a set of targets, and to achieve the targets it'll need a particular configuration of capital, of technology, of market information, and also appropriate personnel to enable it to achieve those outcomes. HR and managers must devise strategies that complement the organization's vision and growth. The two strategies must inform one another. So HR and managers must get together. It's not it's not the case that the HRM department are isolated or aloof from the rest of the organisation. They are a department of the organisation. They're every bit as much a department of the organisation as is production or marketing or accounts. And as such, they should be aware of the direction in which the business wants to move, and they should make a contribution towards that. And their unique contribution is to ensure that the personnel of the organisation are appropriate, that they are appropriately selected and trained to achieve the required outcomes. Factors such as people management, employee motivation and deployment, availability of skills and knowledge should strengthen and shape the business strategy. It is a two-way process. It's not the case that the business should set up a strategic goal and get the various departments, to work towards the achievement of that goal. The goal itself should be realistic. It should be tempered by the resources of the business. It should be appropriate. It should be achievable. It should be realistic. And once the managers, the departmental managers, the functional managers, recognize the corporate objectives are realistic and achievable, then they can set about the deployment of their resources, including people, in a way that will effectively bring about the strategic objective. So it is a situation where the senior management set up the strategic objectives, but really the senior management should consult with the functional managers to ensure that what they're setting up is achievable and it's realistic. The timescale is right, the resources are in place, it can be done. There is no point in setting strategic objectives that are unrealistic, given the resource package of the business and given the market in which it operates. Strategic planning is a key component in developing HR strategies. Management must be able to plan for the future and ensure that the organisation has sufficient people resources. So once the strategic plan is set in place, this is a long-term situation. They may be dealing with, let's say, planning over 5 years or even longer. Once that's in place, then in a sense the parameters have been defined. The HRM department may then set about looking for appropriate personnel with appropriate skills, competencies, attitudes, reliability, good track record from other companies, good references, good recommendations and testimonials. So they may then set about getting appropriate personnel in place and ensure that there is appropriate training to enable the organisation to embark on this route of achieving its strategic objectives. Strategic planning helps the organisation identify its future needs and skills which support the organisation's long-term goals. So the job for the HRM department is not just to put training programs in place, but appropriate training programs. Ones which are directed towards the achievement of the corporate objective, the corporate strategy. So the corporate strategy must be analysed and dissected, and then training programs built around its achievement, so that employees who attend the training programs will have a clearer picture of what's required of them, and also an understanding of the rationale. Why is the organisation moving in this way? What are the competitive pressures that are pushing the organisation in a particular direction? And what is the desired outcome? And how do they know when it's been achieved? The economy is constantly changing, and planning is vital for an organisation. Businesses work in the world in which there are other forces in play. I've suggested earlier that there are other techniques that could be used, SWOT and PESTEL and so on. Companies must recognise that we live in a very sophisticated world, a world in which communications is becoming ever faster and ever more reliable. There's more awareness, perhaps in one country now, of what's happening in remote parts of the world than there's ever been. When there's an issue in a different country, we see it on the news. We may see it in real time on the news on television. Well, historically that was not the case. The news would come through in 100 years ago. The news would come through a week later, perhaps, or a long time after the event has happened. So we live in a world with an increasing technological base, with consumers who are more informed, that is globalized, so that competitors from overseas can see the markets clearly and do analysis of the markets from a distance even, and can then attempt to penetrate the markets by importing perhaps cheaper imports, but good quality imports. So organizations must work hard to deal with this uncertainty, the uncertainty created by ever increasing technological capability, but also look at the increasing social pressures on organizations to have more benign working practices, more flexible working practices. They must have more attention towards health and safety, quite properly all of these issues I should say, but they must have more attention towards health and safety and motivation within the workforce and so on, if they're going to survive within the market. So organizations find themselves in a very complex situation with many forces acting on the organization, and it's the HRM department that must bear the brunt of this. It's the HRM department that must ensure that the employees have appropriate skills. Not skills that are running after the rest, but skills that are perhaps even leading the rest, or ones that are at a minimum as good as what is available in other companies and in other parts of that industry. If it doesn't, then that company is at a competitive disadvantage. So what's happening in the economy drives the direction in which the business travels, and also the extent to which the company is able to meet the challenges of the changing economy will be an indicator of its likely success or not. Strategic planning ensures that the organisation is capable of adapting to new trends and opportunities. The idea of strategic planning is to set the strategy and then plan the resources to enable the organisation to achieve the strategy. And the big resource that needs to be planned, of course, are the employees. Those are the people who will do the activities that will bring about the strategic objective. And it's essential that the HRM department understand precisely what is required of the employees, and it should conduct an audit of the skills available currently and the skills required in order to achieve the corporate objective. And the difference between the two needs to be, in a sense, plugged by appropriate training schemes and by support measures. Strategic planning works towards achieving business strategy. Strategic planning reviews HR and the future needs and skills of human resources. It's essential that the HR department know what the skill base of the company is currently and what is required in the future if it's going to achieve its strategic aim. And then it must, as I said earlier, it must plug the difference. It must design appropriate training schemes to enable the human resource to develop and to take on the challenges that may be thrown at the organization from globalization and from an emerging technology. Strategic planning involves the following: how many staff is needed to meeting business long-term goals? How many staff are required? It's a head count. How many are needed? Which will be an indication of the resources that the organization must dedicate to personnel. Then what jobs need to be completed? Knowing the strategic objective of the business will be an indicator of the type of jobs that need to be completed. So what jobs need to be done? What skills, knowledge and capabilities are required from the employees? There may be a whole range of jobs, and those jobs will require varying skills. Some will need to be financial skills, some will need to be personnel skills, some will need to be marketing, and some will be computer-based skills, some will be communication skills and logistics skills, and so on. There is a need to assess precisely what the skills are and what the skills required will be. The external environment plays a role in strategic planning. How does the economy impact on work opportunities and the ability to attract new employees? Well, if the labour market is buoyant, let's say the economy is running at very high levels of economic activity, the country is doing well, there's high employment, very low unemployment, and wages and salaries are rising, and it's a prosperous country, let's assume. In that case, the individual organisation will be under pressure to try and recruit appropriate personnel. They will need to attract people into the company, and to do that they will have to offer terms and remuneration which is higher perhaps than the market rate. So the wider economy impacts on the business, on the business's ability to recruit appropriate personnel and to retain them. Are there any threats, technological or cultural trends that affect the way skilled labour will be required? Well, the fact is that the economy is constantly changing. There are constantly new innovations and changes, new techniques, new products, new technologies. These are emerging all the time. There are new cultural trends. People are different. They see products differently. They may even see their own lifestyles as different. Perhaps some people are totally committed to work and wish to work long hours and have a high salary. Others may want to have an adequate salary but spend more time with their family. And there are all sorts of trends and movements in society which will affect the ability of the organization to recruit and retain appropriate personnel. Overwhelmingly, there is a need on the part of employees to have appropriate technical skills. They should be able to perhaps send emails and communicate efficiently using computer technology. And perhaps that's the baseline for some activities. But the HRM department have to determine what are the core skills that are absolutely essential, make sure those are in place, and then try to top them up with training activities to try and refine and improve those skills. So what are the changes occurring in the labour market? What are the education changes? What sort of people are involved in the labour market? Employees and employers. What is the going rate, and what are the terms and conditions that employees expect? And these will impact on the organisation. How is the community changing and how we meet these demands? As I said, we live in an ever-changing society because of fashion trends and cultural movements and greater awareness on the part of individuals of what's happening around them because of better communications. So we are aware of what's happening not just down the road in our own communities, but also perhaps across the world. This leads to organizations requiring personnel who are skilled in reading trends and understanding what's happening in society, and understanding the movements that seem to be important in the world. And when the personnel understand it, they can then seek support from training programs, make recommendations to the HR department that training is required in certain ways, and there can be a more focused effort on the part of HRM to deliver training programs and support programs to employees, given the type of technological base that the employees find themselves in, and given the amount of information that's available to the analysts within the business. Clearly, a lot of filtering has to take place. Clearly, the business needs to cut through all of the information that's floating around and find the information that's specific to their requirements. And that requires trained and competent personnel. HRM must develop strategies that support business long-term goals. There's restructuring strategies when the business needs to be restructured, training and development strategies, recruitment strategies should be in place, outsourcing, looking at the possibilities of outsourcing some work to other organizations. Let's start by looking at restructuring strategies. HR managers may use these strategies, reducing staff by redundancy, deployment and attrition. Sadly, it's the case that organizations change over time, probably to the detriment of some personnel. Perhaps some workers have not kept up to date, or have not updated their skills, or have not joined in this race to be fluent and competent in the type of technology that we see used in business. As a consequence of this, organizations go through periods where unfortunately some members of staff will be made redundant or will be moved from one type of activity to another. There'll also be some sort of attrition, in other words, a wearing down of the workforce. It might be a reduction in terms of involvement of the workforce, perhaps shorter working hours and shorter working week because of the onset of technology, which may be labour saving. But going back to redundancy, this is very harsh because people will lose their livelihoods, and it'll affect their families and affect themselves. And it normally comes around through the changes in the market. When the market declines and the demand for the product declines, organisations have to cut back. It could also come around because people are now in competition with each other and also in competition with labour saving technology, which may lead to redundancies. Machines are capable of doing tasks which previously were performed by people. So HR management must implement these policies. As far as possible, it should try to minimise the effects of these policies on the employees, but sometimes that's difficult to achieve. Redundancy is redundancy. Sometimes there could be a regrouping of work tasks to create well-designed jobs. It may be that the organisation needs to be restructured, and the restructuring means that employees who worked in one department will be asked to work in a different department perhaps and acquire new skill sets. This may be traumatic for the employees who are accustomed to working in a particular way and are comfortable in working in that way, and now they're moved to a different situation and asked to acquire different skills. But again, that's the function of HR, to try and deliver that flexibility. There could be reorganising work units and departments to achieve efficiency. It could be that the HR department is asked to look at work units, perhaps functional departments, and asked to see what they can do to foster efficiency within that department. It could be that the employees within the department need retraining, or they need motivation, or there's something amiss in that department, there's something wrong with the department, it's not fulfilling its requirements. So the HR department may become involved and work alongside the functional manager to try and address whatever issues there are. The training and development strategies, well, offering training and development opportunities to employees. It may be that it's simply an offer. In other words, it's optional. The employees may decide to undertake the training, or they may not. In some situations that may be the case, but in other situations the training may not be optional. It may be essential because new technology is about to be brought in, the employees need to be trained on its use. There's no choice. Training is compulsory. It's important also that training and development takes place for career development and for career planning. Employees should have an opportunity to develop themselves and their careers within the organisation, and to help them to do that, appropriate training programs should be put into place. Ensure training is sufficient for future demands of the organisation. The HRM department, the Human Resource Management Department, should have a programme of training events that cover all aspects of the job. And these should be updated on a regular basis to ensure that they are contemporary, that they meet the requirements of the moment, of that period. It's important that the HRM department tries to anticipate future demands that will be made on the employees, anticipate those, and provide training in advance so there are no surprises down the line. Now, recruitment strategies. Recruit new staff with the skills and knowledge needed for future business needs. This, of course, means that the HRM department must be aware of what the future needs will be. Now, they can get some guidance from this from the strategic plan of the organisation, but they may also need to do some research into the types of technologies that are being planned or are about to arrive, what the competitors are doing in terms of their training and development programs, perhaps keeping up to date with technical manuals and being involved in seminars and discussions outside of the organisation. So it's important that new staff are then equipped with the appropriate skills and given opportunities to have access to appropriate training to develop those skills, which will meet future business needs. But in a sense, this is crystal ball gazing, because no one can be quite sure of what the future is going to be. And it may be that the organisation develops certain sets of skills which become obsolete because of changes in technology or working practices, or because of new issues associated with global trade. Encourage internal recruitment and job promotion. The best type of managers really should come from the inside. It should come from people who have had experience of working in different departments within the organisation, who know the organisation, who know its culture, its history and its products, and also know its customers and its development. And if promotion is based on existing employees, there will be less training required, less acculturation required to get them up to speed and to perform their new tasks efficiently. There should be a way of implementing new assessment techniques to assess candidates' suitability. I say a way of implementing it, but sometimes within the recruitment process, quite innovative techniques have been developed. Psychometric testing in the past was quite innovative. Now it's more or less accepted. But it could be the use of centres, recruitment centres, where activities can be set out to judge the suitability of employees to work in groups or to problem solve or to think laterally. So it's important that the organisation makes sure that it's got appropriate recruitment techniques to filter out the applicants and to ensure that the right people are recruited. And this may mean the use of assessment centres and the use of modern assessment techniques, perhaps involving outside professionals as well, not just the internal staff to the HRM department. Of course, a lot of it will depend on the type of vacancy that's been filled and the importance of that particular vacancy. Outsourcing strategies. Well, employ external agencies or individuals to carry out jobs for the organisation. Sometimes that's the cheapest way to go. Instead of training the employees within the organisation to acquire particular skills that may not be used very often, it may be better to outsource that particular task to another organisation who perhaps has got a history of performing similar tasks, and they will have the appropriate technology, machines and capability to deliver the product. External agencies and freelance organisations can help reduce employee costs for the organisation, but also investment costs. As I said, the external agencies may have appropriate machines and technologies, and be more better configured to take on the task. And therefore it's much cheaper to engage those outside agencies than to attempt to make the product internally. Now, the benefits of line managers in developing strategy. Well, line managers communicate with employees on a daily basis. They specialize in people management. Line managers are very important as sources of information about the employees. They work with the employees to know exactly what is going on, what are the issues, and what needs to be developed and trained. The employees need to be dealt with in a supportive manner, and in order to do that, they look to a sympathetic member of staff, a member of staff who knows the conditions they're working in, who knows what their skills are, who sees them working on a daily basis, and that is obviously the line manager. So the line manager is an important conduit with the employees, feeds back to the HR, the people, what skills need to be developed and what competencies need to be strengthened, and what training programs are most appropriate, and what supportive mechanisms need to be put into place. And also what motivations need to be put into place, because the line managers understand that the employees are working to earn a living, to feed their families and to survive in life. So they want to have a good place to work, but they also need to be appropriately remunerated and rewarded for their efforts. And the line manager feeds back this to the HR department. They have better knowledge of operational costs in regards to their department. The line managers understand the micro issues associated with production. They understand where costs are incurred. They understand the efficiencies, the process, the job tasks, because they're at the cutting edge. They're the ones who see it happen. The line managers work daily with the employees. They work daily, and they see how the jobs are configured, how they work. They see how the employees cope with issues as they arise, perhaps say a breakdown in communications or in the system or on a machine or whatever it is, and they see how the employees respond to it. They know which employees are more adaptable and more capable. They know what skills are required to ensure continuity of production. And they can make recommendations to HR regarding all of this. And these are situations that would not be picked up without the knowledge and, in a sense, intervention of the line manager. They monitor and evaluate work processes and quality. They understand the need for quality if they themselves are properly trained, and they will impart this to the employees. And there will be a focus and an emphasis on quality, but also on the efficiency of the technology that's used, and on the capability of the employees to use that technology to produce outcomes that are good quality. So they're important for monitoring. They measure employee performance and operational performance. So they measure how each worker is contributing towards the section, towards the production section, let's say. But they also monitor the operational performance, the overall performance of that section, and can make recommendations back to the organisation regarding design, plant layout, technology, as well as the HR requirements in terms of training and support and guidance and mentoring and all of the issues which may go to contribute to more productivity within that section. So in some areas, not all, they may deal with customers on a daily basis. Depends on the nature of the business. But line managers are a very flexible resource within businesses. They're the ones who get the job done. They're the ones who interface with the employees and the management, the higher layers of management. They're the linkage, and they're able to make sure that there is good practices, good efficient working, safe practices within the section. There's appropriate feedback to HR regarding training and so on. But they may also, in some circumstances, talk to the customers. And that means there is a direct connection between the output of the section, the quality of the output, and the customer's requirements. Now, in some organizations where it's perhaps a large organization, it may not be the case that the line managers come in direct contact with the customers. It may be left to the sales personnel or to the marketing personnel who perhaps go into the market to try and understand the customer requirements, and who also perhaps pick up orders while they're there. So it's it may or may not be the case. It's difficult to say on that last point. Now, the benefits of employees in developing strategy. Well, employees are key assets they're key assets for the organisation. They drive and achieve organisation success. So, employees must be seen as the key asset. Without the employees, nothing will happen. Without the employees, there will be poor quality output or no output. In the logic of the situation is, if there are no employees, nothing will happen. But they are key assets. It's important that they are not just quantitatively the right amount, but qualitatively the right amount. And to that end, HR has the obligation to ensure that the quality of the personnel are appropriate, but also improving to enable the organisation to gain the competitive advantage that we talked about earlier. Employees play a role in developing performance indicators for continuous improvement. Employees may be looked at in terms of appraisal, for example, to see what targets can be set, realistic targets can be set for them to achieve within the next year, let's say. What have they achieved in the previous year, and what skills and competencies have they been developed, and where are weaknesses, and how can the weaknesses be addressed? So for continuous improvement, in terms of organisational achievements, there should be continuous improvement in terms of the employees. It's the employees who make the product, who innovate the product, who think about the product, who work diligently and efficiently and dedicate themselves to the achievement of their own particular targets, which feed into the wider corporate target. There may be sharing best practice, and it improves organisational efficiency. Employees will, through learning by doing, develop skills which are appropriate in certain ways. It may be that those skills are transferable, that other parts of the organisation can learn from what one part of the organisation has picked up or has developed. So there may be a sharing of best practice across the organisation, which will improve organisational efficiency. It may be that employees, as I said, by learning by doing a task repetitively day in, day out, they find shortcuts and efficiencies and ways of organising their working situation to make it better, and that best practice may be shared elsewhere. There should be effective reward systems to promote performance and productivity. It's felt that it's appropriate that employees be rewarded sufficiently for their efforts. Employees should who come up with good ideas, who innovate the production method, who produce good quality output, who dedicate themselves diligently and efficiently to production. This should be rewarded. And that should take the form of some sort of remuneration, ideally. But it could be, if it's a small scale thing, just acknowledgement. At least the very minimum that management can do is to acknowledge the contribution of the employee. But if it's a prolonged development and it's significant, then there should be some remuneration associated with this to reward the employee. It could be even promotion within the organization because the employee has made such a significant contribution. There should be effective communication and feedback because this minimizes errors. It's important that the organization has efficient communications and that there are good channels of communications available. Employees should be able to post questions on the intranet or approach managers and ask questions and clarify issues. There shouldn't be a reticence on their part to do this. They should be encouraged to do it. And there should be some feedback from questions and answers and monitoring of situations. When an employee is monitored, and if the results are positive or negative, one or the other, doesn't matter, they should get feedback to say you've done very well or this needs to be improved. And where areas of weakness are identified, some remedial process put in place to try and address that. Those are the sources that have been consulted in looking at this issue. It's an important issue because the employees are the backbone of the business. The employees should be recruited and helped to perform functions that feed in to the achievement of the corporate strategy, the corporate direction that the business wants to take. So it's fine-tuning the efforts of the employees to achieve the corporate desires, the direction the business wants to move in. But that's all we're going to do in this session. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.